Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, frequent flyers. Thank you for joining us in the lounge. Today I have Cran Middlecoat, who I connected with on LinkedIn, and he has in his headline, "That Pilot Guy." So I was immediately intrigued, and after looking at his profile, I knew we would be very aligned because he talks about how we can redefine failure and chasing discomfort helps us in our endeavors to be successful. Born in Brisbane, Australia, Cran has had a lifelong obsession with everything aviation and aerospace. You can note all of the paraphernalia behind him. We immediately connected on that, loving both the stars and airplanes. And he was licensed to fly before he could even drive. However, things took a turn for the worse when we had a moment where he woke up in intensive care, and I had to go through a series of events that were not comfortable at all, that led him to having to find a new way to love aviation and bring that into his life. Cran, it is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being on the show.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
It's wonderful to connect, and I'm so grateful to have you here, particularly because as we were talking before we went live, people in aviation are extremely passionate, and they love it. They breathe it. We love the smell of jet fuel. I mean, I have seen candles in the Smithsonian literally labeled
Yeah,
jet fuel, and you open them and boy, do they smell like jet fuel.
they smell like burning jet fuel. Yep.
But we were
Love that
talking about how we can over-identify with
smell.
aviation or being an aviator, and that can cause a lot of suffering if we do experience something that causes a pivot. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about your story and what happened to you that caused you to have this devastating setback.
Well, I wish I could pinpoint it. I really do.
Yeah.
Everything was fine. I was a first officer on the Boeing 787 and um, put my bids in to become a captain back on the narrow body flying the Airbus 320. It was all lined up. It was all making good sense to me. And then I started to get these horrible, horrible episodes of severe fatigue.
Mm,
And it's like, and out of nowhere, like I remember the first time I really noticed it, I walked straight out. I was in Tokyo on an
okay.
overnight up there. Walked out of a coffee shop, just had a coffee and
Wow.
fatigue. And a very, very, very long story short, I'm not exactly sure how many ologists and specialists I went to. I finally did an MRI on my brain and discovered this lesion growing right between the hemispheres of my brain.
Wow.
And that led to surgery and seizures, and there goes the pilot's medical. So
Yeah.
pretty devastating, pretty devastating. Like dad was a pilot, granddad was a pilot, my son's a pilot. That's all we want to do is just fly.
Yeah.
And when it's taken away from you, it's a hit. It's a real serious hit.
Absolutely. And how did you handle that? For people who are listening, whether they might have something that they know about or that comes on suddenly, what were the strategies? How did you find your way through? Obviously, you're here today, and I know you're talking to a lot of people to help inspire them to follow their dreams and to find careers in aviation. Uh, Obviously, this is no longer something you could do. So, how did you reconnect to aviation, and what were some of the things that helped you get through that setback?
Well, for a long time, I didn't. For a long time, it was really tough,
Yeah.
and I a lot of time it was like, oh no, they thought it was just something simple like glandular fever. Take a few weeks off, I'll be fine. I'll get back to
Mm,
work. And then it started to prove there's going to be more than that. So for a long time, I had this sort of false hope that something would, what it proved to be a false hope that it would be, I'd be back in the cockpit and everything
mm,
would be fine. And then things just changed. And what I did is started a business doing STEM education, something which I wanted to do to have a bit of a sideline business going and for my partner, and then we got that going. So that gave me a focal point. So that was a good start. That was a
mm,
focal point. Something else I could put my energy into, and having that was probably the best thing. Even
mm.
though there was times where I just could not get myself off the couch. I was so tired and so fatigued. It was absolutely horrible. Sort of lying down, just begging for darkness to come so I could sleep at night. It was horrible. But having my business there was certainly uh, something I could own. I could own, and it was something that I could control, and
Yes.
how much I put myself into it. And that was really, really good. And that was, I was just doing STEM education. You may have seen my original website, It's Rocket Science, where I just would go and launch rockets and do STEM education with the students. And that
Mhm.
was a lot of fun. And then, in amongst that, I had the surgery, and then I was asked to go and speak with the university, the aviation students, the young pilots learning to fly at Griffith University here in Brisbane. And I thought, yeah, okay, I can do that, and put together a few slides, and had these students laughing, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I'm actually quite enjoying myself here with this public speaking business. And so that's sort of like, that gave me another focal point, and that was when I really needed it, because that's when things got, that's just as COVID started to hit.
Mm.
Our business was at 3 years. We had so much business lined up, we didn't know where we were going to get the staff from. And then COVID came and absolutely destroyed it.
Yeah. So
And
another devastating setback.
another devastating setback. And so it was, and so all this happened, and I just kept finding, I just had to find a focal point. The one thing I did rely on was that when I was learning to fly, just the determination, nothing was going to stop me. I mean, not the exams, not the tens of thousands of dollars it costs to learn to fly. So I knew I could get through something with determination. I
Mm.
knew I had that in me. So I just had to do it again, albeit it wasn't actually learning to fly. It was starting a business and helping somebody else and solving somebody else's problem with what I can do and the skill set I had.
Mm. I love hearing how you you admit that it was hard. You're
Mm,
not trying to
really hard.
paint unicorns and rainbows, because sometimes
Yeah.
that's what, in hindsight, it's always easier. We always have the answers. We can find the silver lining, yes. But admitting that it's hard is really important, because, I know in Australia they have the campaign, it's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's important that we acknowledge, whatever the setback that we're facing is, we acknowledge that it sucks, that it's hard. And at
Yeah.
the same time, we can dig deep and find the determination and the focal point to help us push through that, feels like you're going through molasses sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, but really feeling those feelings and processing is crucially important, because otherwise that's a recipe for, implosion or explosion at another point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Uh,
it's certainly okay to not be okay.
Absolutely. And right now in the US, you may have heard the FAA's released the ARC report, and they're really looking at pilots' mental health and the pathways where, support can be provided and what's approved and not approved, and is a long time overdue. There's still more work to be done, but
It is concerning. There is
it
still
is, yeah,
such a stigma associated with mental health, anywhere, in any profession. There's that
yes,
stigma of a failure. You're off. You've gone nuts or something like that. There's still that horrible
right,
stigma. It is so bad in aviation, because
yeah,
it's just, you know there are pilots flying who should not be flying. There really is, but we've just got to break down those barriers and
yeah.
give those pilots the support when it's needed.
Absolutely. And to have pathways and avenues for, I think also too, it's mental health doesn't mean that you are mentally unstable. It's, we take a shower every day. We don't go a week and go, man, I need to take a shower again. How would I get dirty? Right? Like we know this is a fact of life, that it's going
Yeah,
to be a repetitive process.
it is.
Same thing if you go to the gym and you want to train your body in a certain way. It's a repetition, it's consistency, it's discipline. And so it's the same thing when we look at our mental performance and making sure that we are operating in a healthy and safe way. And so we all need to do our part to unwind that stigma and break the barriers down of speaking about, it's not like we're going to all and hold hands and sing kumbaya and just be fluffy. No, this is important for our brains to process and to clean out, and create space for new things to come in, right? And instead of going around in loops, the last thing you want is someone up in the cockpit or in a rocket ship that cannot emotionally regulate, that cannot have the most optimal state for performance.
Mhm.
And, I was just, before we went live, I was finishing up a space leadership program that I'm a part of called Space Kind.
Mhm.
And someone made a comment that astronauts are some of the best liars when it comes to their health, and pilots too. And I said, oh, absolutely. And the thing is, though, is they're also lying to themselves, right?
Mhm.
We are all very good at deluding ourselves into thinking something's a certain way, but that's an illusion, isn't it?
Mm. Oh, very much so. Yeah, and the human brain's a powerful thing. We can talk ourselves into anything, just about.
Oh yeah, yes. What would you say to people out there that are listening that what are some of the steps that they can take to help with this process? If they are struggling to ask for help, they don't even know what to ask for. How would you guide them?
Look, it's a very dynamic situation. Um, Ironically, I think it actually starts when we're at school,
Mm,
because we've put this false expectation on us that perfection is the standard to get an A, to get an A
right.
plus, whatever it is, and that's not achievable. Frankly, perfection doesn't even exist. Stephen Hawking said that, and to be able to get past that expectation of putting that expectation of perfection is a giant step forward. That is a giant step forward. You've got to be able to fail, and it's
Mm,
okay to fail. That's where the best lessons are. And don't think yourself anything less of that. And then whether you're working on a project or whether it's something new in life which you're working on, like a new chapter, if you're battling that mental health, uh, the black dog that comes to roost every so often, it's okay to fail.
mm,
And one of my favorite quotes is an Einstein quote. Albert Einstein said, "Failure is success in progress."
yeah.
It's not. And like another thing I'll say, there's a common misconception is that success is the opposite to failure. I don't believe that. The opposite to failure is giving up.
Right.
The opposite to failure is giving up. Success and failure are two completely, I believe anyway. I'm sure if you look in the Oxford Dictionary, the definitions would be counter to what I'm saying. But my personal answer is there's success and then there's failure, and they're not necessarily opposite to each other. And breaking down that stigma that failure is bad and that perfection is the standard, I think is a really good start
Mm,
in any aspect, whether you're starting a new business or whether you're battling some personal issues. It's
yeah.
okay to stuff things up to the point where one of the wisest pieces of advice I got from an airline pilot was with like depending on your airline, multiple times a year, you're in the simulator. And the simulators are an exact replication of, or as close to an exact replication of the real aeroplane, with a check captain sitting behind you who can fail instruments. You can put ice on the wings. You can control the weather. Some even have smoke machines, so they put smoke in the cockpit and everything like that. And there is just so much you've got to remember. And
Yeah.
every airplane has a list of emergency memory items you've got to know from memory. There's no excuse. You've got to know them. And so I didn't trust my memory. So I'd record these memory items on my phone and listen to them as I drove to work. And that way, they're always at the forefront of my mind. I always had those emergency procedures at the forefront of my mind, ready to go. And that was a technique which worked for me.
Mm,
What I didn't realize was that I knew those as close to perfection as I could when I was driving the car. When I got into the
mm,
simulator and the real aeroplane, the dynamic was completely different.
mm,
And that different dynamic, I'd make a minor stuff up.
yeah.
And then I'd focus on that. And I thought, oh, Cran, you idiot. You know this stuff. That's stupid. What are you, moron? That would
Mm.
distract me.
That
I'd
inner
make
critic
another
came to
mistake.
play.
And then I had this self sustaining horror story of kicking myself in the butt and trying to
Yeah.
fly an aeroplane at the same time. And I had a very wise check captain. His name was Bruce, actually. He came to me and he said, you've got to allow yourself to stuff up. So go into a simulator check and allow an error budget. Is
Mm.
basically how I said. So I now go into a sim and say, I'm going to completely stuff up 20% of it, but I'm going to nail the other 80. You've got to allow yourself to make mistakes. That is just being a human being,
Oh yeah.
allowing yourself to make mistakes. You've got
I
to do
make
it.
mistakes every day.
Yeah, and it might be, oh heck, I forgot to buy that bottle of milk from the shops. I mean, yeah, and most people think pilots have to be this exceptional standard. I mean, I'm far from a perfect pilot. I can assure you of that. There's no such thing as the perfect pilot, but that doesn't mean I'm unsafe.
Right.
That does not mean I'm unsafe, and you've got to allow yourself to make those mistakes, and that's where the best learning comes from, is from those mistakes. And to the point where in the sim, you've got to know how to fail properly. Like a check captain will start loading so many things at you. There's failure after failure after failure, and you're trying to juggle all these balls and trying to keep them all in the air. It'll get to a point where you physically can't keep them all up. You've got to know what to drop. You've got to know
Right.
what to fail. And
Absolutely.
that's and so ironically, in order to pass, you've got to know how to fail. You've got to fail properly in order to pass, which
Yeah.
is, quite a philosophical irony, really, when you think about it.
It is. I mean, and what a great point that you're making as well, because we hear this in the business sense as well, that if for a company, for example, if you're the CEO and you're leading this organization, your win, your success might be a lower loss, right? You're still negative, you're still not profitable yet, but it's less than it was before, so that's a win,
And
right?
celebrate
And
the win.
yes, so
Celebrate
we
the
have to
win.
celebrate the wins, and I
Yeah.
love that you're saying know how to fail properly, because just like you have a process and a procedure with your checklist and the order of operations with things, knowing what you can let go, that it will be a minuscule ripple effect, versus if you let that one go, it's irrecoverable. Like that is the crucial information to know. And if you
Mhm.
look at sports, right, you are taught how to, I was a figure skater, I was taught how to fall on the ice properly. So
Mhm.
if I find myself falling, how do I twist myself so I, instead of throwing out your wrists and your
Mhm.
hands and breaking a wrist, or snowboarders do the same. Every sport has their bailout,
Mhm.
so that you don't have a major injury and you walk away with maybe a bump and a bruise. And
Mhm.
so I love that you just brought up that concept, because
Mhm.
I think we don't approach academics or things like flying in the same manner necessarily. We think that there's, and in some cases, obviously the margin for error becomes slimmer and slimmer, right? If you're flying in a formation with as the Thunderbirds of Blue Angels, that margin for error is very tiny,
Yeah.
right? But
You'll
because,
never get perfection, though. No matter how
right,
tiny the margin gets, there'll still be an imperfection. And if you
exactly.
focusing on the imperfection, it's exhausting for one. In fact, I think that was my LinkedIn post yesterday, is
The
not
energy it
focusing.
takes.
Yeah, the like perfection is absolute perfection is unattainable. And what you do, you end up focusing on what you've done wrong, and you focus
Mm.
on your inadequacies. And that can be absolutely demoralizing.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
you're
And you'll
trying to
find
get
more reasons to confirm it, right? Confirmation bias.
the confirmation. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can be a really, really detrimental thing.
That was really great advice that your Czech training captain gave to you. And I thank you for sharing that here as well, because, we in aviation, we also tend to have a lot of very high performers in type
Hmm.
A.
Yeah.
And, we hold ourselves to high standards. And so, I think for anyone who might be kind of sitting here going like, oh, having their, comments back, it's not about we're not striving for excellence. It's not that we're just going to be mediocre. It's
Hmm.
simply allowing ourselves the room to be able to recover from these mistakes, instead of getting so wrapped up in it that the tiny mistake you make in the beginning snowballs into
Yeah.
something more massive.
Hmm.
And learning from those things.
Yeah.
I heard once fail as an acronym is first attempt in learning.
I love that one. I love that one. And I tell my kids that. That's when I'm working in the primary schools, and like I was working with prep students, so sort of your pre-primary 5-year-olds yesterday,
Okay.
and we launched 3 rockets. The first one is empty, so I use water and air propelled rockets. And the
Okay.
first one is empty, the second one is full, and the third one's half full. So it's a big focus on fair testing, changing one thing at a time. And anyway, because the first one, because it's so heavy and there's no room for the air, it might go on meter. And I said, is that a fail? Oh, yeah, epic fail, blah, 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 blah. Hang on a minute. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to make rockets fly. Yeah. Well, that rocket flew. Okay, it didn't fly very high, but it still flew. So isn't that a success? We achieved what we set out. We had a success. All right. And I said, FAIL, it means first attempt in learning. And I love that one. And kids just get it. The kids just get an acronym. And it sort of really, it has that mental shift where, yes, it didn't achieve what they expected, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. We've learned something. We've learned that too much water makes a rocket really heavy. So that's a success. It's an absolute success. And really, frankly, the whole I can't speak for any other nations in the world, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them would be very similar, but definitely in Australia, the entire education system needs a major, major overhaul. All we've done is replace textbooks with these things. And rather than really looking at the content we are educating and how we educate it to think it could be so much better, we really need to overhaul the education system to stop stigmatizing failure as a bad thing at the very least.
Yes, no, I agree. I think the education system in the US certainly needs an overhaul, and we need to be bringing in things like emotional regulation and stress management, and how do we communicate with each other, right? How do we build relationships? That's never taught, or how to do your taxes, right? That certainly was never a class I had in school. Meanwhile, I'm learning how to, do something arbitrary that won't ever use again. So yes, there are some things that we need to evolve in the school systems, absolutely, including having more time for recess and play, because play is really powerful as a tool to learn. And when children and adults play, there's a lot of benefit, but we can fail in the playing and have fun with it and reorganize rules of the game. The stakes are lower, right? And that's actually very crucial to learning. How is it over in Australia? I know in some places in the US, this recess is like 15, 20 minutes. It's really ridiculous.
I'd say it's very, very similar. You might have 20 minutes, half an hour at one break, and then you like big lunch, little lunch or something like that, where you have half an hour for one and then 45 minutes to an hour for the other. To me, it sounds very similar.
Well, we've got some work to do, all the educators who are watching, how we can, show up as parents, as how we can show up as mentors. I know a lot of people that I'm connected to, and I know you do a lot of mentorship work as well, Cran. We can do our part to help shift the tide with this narrative. And, I always like to say, if the drops of the ocean all move together in the same direction, we can become a wave, which can then be turned into a tsunami, right? And so it's getting people excited about the cause and helping to be that tide of change by being the change ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I know you, when we were doing our setup for this call, we were talking about the OG smart device and how you're encouraging, especially the newer generation who's just, these things are glued to their hands. Tell me how you talk about what is the OG smart device to you, and how do you encourage people to use it?
Well, the way I sort of encourage people to, particularly in the STEM workshops where I'm working, is there is no smart device. Well, smart devices. We've got to use that one between our heads, between our ears, I should say. And what concerns me is that students are defaulting to Google. That's the default, or whatever the case may be, rather than even attempting to solve a problem. I was working in a school some time ago, and we were building model aircraft out of foam board. Now, it meant to be little chuck gliders which flew around, and all the students, like a sheet of card and a rectangle, and from the long side they had to measure 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, and draw a line. That was it. It was very, very, very straightforward. And so I explained it, and then had some students saying, "Oh, what do we do?" So, okay, well, I explained it again, and they didn't even. The response was, "Oh, here, can you do it?" Straight away, they didn't even try.
Try.
They gave it to me straight away. These students were not comfortable using a ruler and a pencil, and they were 15, Sarah.
Wow.
They were 15 years old, and they were not comfortable using a ruler and a pencil. And it still amazes me every time I share that story. And honestly, if I'd not seen it with my own eyes, I don't think I would have believed it.
Yeah.
But it just astounds me. And so you've got to break that barrier down for a starter to say, right, you can actually achieve pretty amazing things if you just got to try. And
it's critical thinking skills,
it's critical
right?
thinking, and being able to facilitate that critical thinking is one thing. But the challenge we've got is that follow-up, that backup. Like the kids go home and then they just go and default to, they sit down and watch TikTok or YouTube or whatever the
Or their
case may be.
parents might just give them an iPad or a phone and say, like to entertain it rather than actually rear their children properly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, children, they're not a fashion accessory. I had my son flying model airplanes when he was 4 years old, and he's now a current Australian champion. So
awesome.
He's a very, very talented young pilot, but school doesn't work for him. So whereas my eldest son is quite the academic, wants to fly fighters in the Air Force. So he's got to be that sort of, really up there.
Yeah.
And so it did. That was how it worked for him. So it was good. So it's horses for courses, and the other thing with the current education system, it's very cookie cutter. It's, and students aren't like that. You don't have a 30 perfectly round holes for 30 perfectly round pegs. All the pegs are different shapes. And the problem is our education system isn't fostering those different shapes. Facilitating that critical thinking and not, I've heard of the expression helicopter parenting, where you're just constantly hovering over your student all the time. The other one I've heard is lawnmower parenting, where you mow down every single obstacle that's in front of them so they don't have to deal with anything.
Wow. Well, and you know what? There are definitely parents who do that. And then these children go away to university and they're on their own for the first time and they cannot handle it. They cannot do basic things because they had never been faced with any obstacle long ago, that we were still, nomadic people and living off the land. Everyone who's listening, I just did this exercise. I follow this writer, and he said that when you go to bed tonight, I want you to just think about if that bed was suddenly not there and you were laying on the ground outside in whatever temperature or storm that was happening, and you had the modest shelter around you, but you were exposed to the elements and that bed was not there. No pillows, no Tempur-Pedic, no, whatever device that you have, I've got all the contraptions, earplugs and all the things to biohack sleep. That was all gone. And you were just outside. It makes you appreciate your bed so much more. But I think as a human, our species is so comfortable that especially in America, I know Australia is slightly different with this. My partner's Australian, but here it's, I have a minor ache. Let me take some Tylenol or Panadol. I have a stomach ache. Let me take some Tums. Oh, now I have this. Let me use some eye drop. Whatever it is, immediately go to have something to get rid of it. There's no just sitting in the feeling or process and learning how to deal with it. It's, I must make this go away. And part of that avoidance of discomfort is actually what causes so much suffering in people.
Oh, absolutely. And because you just don't know how to deal with discomfort when it happens. And that's another thing. You've got to be prepared to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Any successful person gets comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is where the magic happens. I regularly share an infographic on my LinkedIn posts, and it's the comfort zone. And and it starts. So you got the comfort zone, then you got the fear zone, then you got the learning zone, and then you got the growth zone.
Yeah.
And you've got to get prepared to get out of that comfort zone and feel uncomfortable, and you've got to be prepared to fail. That you'll fail. You will not feel confident, and that's absolutely okay. That's part of the process. In order to get to the growth zone, which becomes your new comfort zone, you've got to break down that barrier. You've got to feel uncomfortable. You've got to fail. You've got to lack confidence, and that's just part of the process. And it's like now with any challenge children face, it's like, oh, it's too hard, I'm out. So yeah.
They just want to pull the ripcord and be like, okay, I'm gone. I'm done with it. Whereas we know the great things in life are earned, not given, right? You cannot get a 6-pack of abs unless you go to the gym and you eat a certain way, right? You have to do certain things. And yet we live in this generation and era of instant gratification, right? I can get this now. And, Amazon push a couple buttons and it arrives maybe in 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
I still remember writing like letters to my pen pal and like waiting weeks and then getting so excited to get something in the mail back from them, right? And now it's a text and instantaneous. No more scratching calling cards and dialing like 20 digits and all of these things we used to have to do.
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. And you had 5 minutes, so you'd have to talk really fast or and warn you have 30 seconds left and you'd say goodbye really quickly. Like, okay, I love you, bye. It's such a different world. So how would you, what are some of the things that you do to get comfortable with being uncomfortable? What are some of the things that you might do as a daily practice or just, have in your life that allow you to face and discomfort regularly?
I try every day is that inevitably you'll have that feeling as, I just don't feel like doing that. I just don't feel like it. That happens. It's inevitable. And I'll try to, just push through just one of those things, get push through one of those, I don't feel like it feelings and actually do it. And then that tends to have a snowball effect where you've done something else you didn't feel like doing. But you just start one, I really don't feel like, and it can be something simple. It can be like, I've got to go and I've got to reconcile all those purchases I've made in the accounting software. I so don't feel like doing that. But just each day, push and just do one. Just say you're going to do one, and then that, like I say, once you're at the desk, you're in your office chair, and then it just tends to have a bit of a start. This is what I find has a bit of a snowball effect, and it's not that bad. Once you get there, it's not that bad.
Yes. We build it up to be bigger than it actually is.
And the human mind is it's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to talk yourself into or out of something without even really trying. So that's what I do, is I try and find out at least one thing I really don't feel like doing. And with that, and that comes down to the discomfort as well. Like, you've got to give it, and when you finally do actually do it, you generally find it wasn't that bad.
Right.
And
it's the daily votes, right? Like James Clear with Atomic Habits. It's less about the fact that you only did one thing. It's about the fact that you showed up to do the one thing.
Yes.
And, like you said, once you're there at the desk and you do one, then you notice like, hey, I classified that Uber transaction correctly. I see 10 more things labeled Uber. I'll just do that now because I know how to do it, right? And all of a sudden you've done more than the one thing. So you walk away feeling even greater about it. And it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, another thing I really like doing is just trying to stay ahead of the game. Like for instance, I knew you and I. Well, okay, so what is it here? Now it's 7:20 in the morning for me here in Australia, and I've got a meeting shortly after this. So last night I made sure my shirt was ironed, my trousers are ironed, I've had everything ready to go, and so when you're thinking ahead of the game, and those plans then fall into place and it works, that is really satisfying.
Yes.
Even though it feels really good that it all sort of came together. It's something which you're thinking well ahead of time. Except I ran out of milk for coffee this morning. I really should be more on top of that. So I haven't had my coffee yet today. So
Oh no. Well, you're very lively for not having a coffee yet.
yeah, goodness for that. But yeah, I'll have to. It's
Um,
like, okay, that's fine. God, Cran, you need to let's pay a bit more attention to the amount of milk you got. I had the coffee, I just didn't have the milk, and I don't have my coffee black.
yeah.
So yeah,
Well, so those small things, though, they help reduce decision fatigue. And then it just gives you that space to be able to be present with the other things that you might have to do. I know I have my little nightly routine where I get my vitamins set out. I put the coffee in my, the cup and put it in the machine and then just put the cup under there and it's like ready to go. You just have to push the button in the morning.
mhm,
And then the days that I don't do that, it's like 15, 20 minutes. Whereas if I do it the night before, it takes me 5, because
yeah,
I know what I want and I know the order of things. But in the morning, it's like I've just woken up, I'm tired, and then I'm ping ponging. I'm like half making the coffee, half doing this, half doing that. Nothing's getting done. And so it can be very powerful to the night before have your clothes set out for the gym or even sleep in your clothes. When I was really resistant to like getting back into a workout routine a couple of years ago, it, it was uncomfortable to sleep in a sports bra and like compression activewear. But it was like, I'm committed to, I have no excuse. I literally just have to roll out of the bed, put my shoes on and get out the
yeah,
door. At
yeah,
one point I was joking that I'd go to sleep with my shoes on, but I didn't have to do that, thankfully.
yeah, yeah. No. You got to draw the line somewhere, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I need some sleep.
Yeah,
Besides, you need to have the foot for like the temperature control, right? You need to be able to put your foot out
yeah,
in case it gets too
yeah,
hot.
true. Yeah, that's right. Keep the core body
Yeah,
temperature regulated.
exactly. Yeah. See, it's knowing what tools you have available and how to regulate yourself, whether it's temperature or emotion, is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Cran, when I want to just take it back to the careers real quick before we kind of start to sign off and go into the 3 questions. For people who might be facing a career pivot, what are some of the things besides, the focal point? Let's say they're not necessarily facing a setback, but they're looking at making a shift of some kind. We're talking about chasing discomfort. We have to redefine failure and redefine success, right?
Mhm.
How do we actually want our day-to-day life to be? But for those that are seeking a change and maybe they can't quite articulate it, how would you encourage them to begin that process?
You don't have to get it right the first time.
Hmm.
You don't have to get it right the first time. You're going to go through some changes. You might think, okay, I'm going to give this a go, and it might not be your thing, and that's
Mm,
absolutely fine. That is absolutely fine. It might not be the what you expected it to be. So don't beat yourself up when you gave something a go and you found out that's not for me.
mm,
You've learned that. That's a first attempt in learning,
yeah.
and there doesn't have to be that one thing. And give it a go. Don't quit your day job. If you're going to look for a pivot and go to somewhere else, do that. The last thing you need is the stress of not having an income by quitting something to go all in on something else, and yeah, that extra stress is probably not particularly healthy. You want to know you've got a bit of a safety net there. That said, though, you don't want to go so far as to having such a heavy safety net that you don't put the effort into doing something new. Sometimes you just do have to burn the bridges or burn the boats, as they say. Um,
Yes.
so, yeah, don't be afraid to try multiple things and say yes to things. Another quote I love, it's a Richard Branson quote. And it's if you're given an opportunity, but you don't know how to work that opportunity, say yes and figure it out later.
Yes,
So
and
don't be afraid to so say yes to things. Even if you don't think you can do it, say yes and figure it out later. The worst
yeah,
that'll happen is you'll learn something along the way. And that
absolutely.
learning is that's and that's coming down. You're putting yourself out of that comfort zone at that point by saying yes to something you don't think you can do, and then figuring out later you're putting yourself. You're into that fear zone. You're out of that comfort zone. You're into that fear zone. You're lacking confidence. You're really feeling fear zone, and right, I'm out of the comfort zone. Then I've made it past the first one, and then you start to get into that learning zone, and then going into the growth zone. So say yes to things, and some things just won't work out, and that's okay.
I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. Because I think so many, again, back to perfection, so many people, if they're going to make a change, want it to be perfect, or they've built it up in their mind of it's going to be this way. And, just like you said before, just because it's not what you expected doesn't mean it's a failure. I mean, sometimes we don't know that we don't like the thing that we think we like until we actually get it. Right. And I've certainly had that where I work really hard towards something and I get there and I'm like, no, actually, this is not fun to do every day. It's fun to do once in a while, or, that's not how I thought it was going to be. And so it's okay to pivot again if you need to.
The other thing is you'll discover something along the way. Like
Yeah.
I had no idea I'd get into public speaking. I lost my career as an airline pilot, and I was doing STEM education, and I really enjoyed that. And then you can stumble into something, and that's exactly what happened with my speaking. I stumbled into that at Griffith University when I spoke to the aviation students, and so you just don't know what you will discover along the way, and you may end up doing something completely different to what you set out to do.
Oh, absolutely.
That's pretty much exactly what happened to me. I set out to set up a STEM education business, and then I've fallen into public motivational, inspirational speaking. Never thought that would be me. So things just happen along the way.
Yeah. And it's about being open to it, and allowing yourself to try it, giving yourself that permission to figure it out, to, say, why the hell not? Right.
Mm-hmm.
We can find all these reasons why we can't, we can flip that too and find all the reasons why we can and why we must, in order to have fun along the journey. I mean, otherwise what's the point, right?
Exactly.
Amazing. All right, Cran. So final round, 3 questions. First question, what is your superpower?
This is one I've spoken about with young people a lot. And I do believe there are actual superpowers, but they're not, being able to, I don't know, fly or lift the tank or anything like that. Or, but it's staying calm. If you can master the calm, and I like to think I've been in some pretty stressful situations, and being able to remain calm is one of the greatest superpowers anyone can have. It really is. Being able to maintain calm and maintain your composure, I think, is a big superpower. And being patient. Instant gratification, that just infuriates me. Young people think they're entitled to it right now. No, you've got to put the work in. You've got to be patient. And so that's becoming like a superpower as well, being able to be patient and let things happen. So yeah, being calm, being able to remain calm under pressure, and being patient. And I think being able to also share those skills with others and the importance they have.
Absolutely. Those are 2 very great skills, which are sadly in short supply in today's world. I've been working on both of those myself for many years, and I am very proud to report that my mother actually put patience on my strengths last year instead of my weaknesses.
Good.
And I was like,
great job.
What? Yes. So, it is, but it's a lifelong thing, because in some situations you might have a high threshold, and in other situations you may have a lower threshold. So working to bring that to everything you do. And so I can tell from your nature and from our conversations that, you have this calming energy, and clearly with what you've been through as well, getting frustrated wasn't going to do anything for you. So, you had a fast track to learning patience.
Yeah.
But that is
Oh,
certainly a superpower.
frustration is not going to disappear. That's always going to be there.
Yeah.
Being able to remain calm throughout that frustration, that's a superpower.
Yes, absolutely. Or when you don't get what you want, or, it doesn't turn out exactly the way you wanted, right? We've all seen those videos where people lose it over like the tiniest little thing, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mhm.
And they, were not able to maintain, the things that they thought they could. So it's
Mhm.
important to bring that to all the things we do.
Mhm.
Amazing. Cran, everyone has a personal board of directors, people they go to and they check in with whenever they're going through something, or, they want advice and maybe some guidance from someone. Who would you say is on your personal board of directors? And now these can be people in your personal life, but they can also be fictional characters. They can be, people you don't know, people from the past,
Mhm.
that they inspire you and they're a lens at which you look through the world.
First and foremost, my partner Danielle. What that woman does for me when I'm yeah, when staying calm is a real struggle, she's right there. So I'm very, very, very fortunate to have her on my board of directors. Um, I also have coaches need coaches,
Mm,
mentors need mentors. Just because you're the mentor doesn't mean you can't be the mentee. And so I've
absolutely.
got a very, very good business coach. His name's Simon Bowden, and we meet twice a month. And he just keeps me on an even keel. He keeps me on the even keel, and having him also as an accountability partner is
Mm,
very, very, very worthwhile. And that is that's just being able. If you say you're going to do something, well, for me, if I say I'm going to do something, there's got to be something horribly wrong before I don't do it. So that really works for me, that accountability partner. But also on the side of social media can be a really good thing. It can be
mm,
a really bad thing, but it can be a really good thing too. And you've probably noticed it because I know we've been connected on LinkedIn for some time. Um, and I post every day on LinkedIn. And I get my regular people always appreciating the work I put into that. And being able to know that, and I get, I've recently I get messages saying thank you for sharing your story. I've just been diagnosed with a brain anomaly as well, and
mm.
um, I really like how you turn it into a positive. I wouldn't you don't think that as a logical term of a board of directors, but having
Yeah,
that person there saying what you're doing is good and it's helped me, that's
yeah.
a really good thing, and you can't really pick where that's going to come from.
No.
But that is certainly something which is really, really worthwhile as well. And so just
Mm.
being you and being genuine, it's super genuine man. Maybe he could be on my board of directors. No, instead of Superman, it's authenticity man or something like that.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great reflection as well, because we don't always know the impact we have. Sometimes people reach out, sometimes they don't, and it's very powerful to share your voice
Hmm.
so that other people can feel seen and heard and not feel alone, and have some hope, right? And they may or may not reach out, but that's not the point, right? It's the point is
Hmm.
to be in service for others. And so that's a really great way to kind of spin that concept around. So thank you for that.
No, my pleasure.
All right, so the final question, it's a
Mhm.
self-awareness question. It's designed, so the question is, how do you best represent humanity? How do you represent us? And so imagine that an alien life form has come to Earth. They meet you, Cran, and it's the first human that they interact with. So what
Mhm.
do they learn about humanity because they've met you?
I'd help them. I genuinely, with genuine authenticity, help them. Help the people. Um, I believe in the ripple effect. Like you do one
Mm,
small thing, it'll have a big ripple effect, and that can be so simple. It can be like putting your shopping cart back in the collection bay, You're helping somebody else. You're helping the young man who's going around collecting all the trolleys and the shopping carts. You've helped him by putting your shopping cart back in the shopping bay. And I really believe that those little things have a big ripple effect. So genuine authenticity and helping people with the genuine desire to help them, I think, is the way I would show that. And then hopefully that ripple effect that people will genuinely help somebody else and push it on like that. So just showing compassion, genuine authenticity, and just helping people, I think, would be what I'd do. As much as I could help an alien life form, I'm sure
well, what they would learn is that humans have the capacity to be helpful, and that we do have these capacities within us for good, and that ripple effect. And may or may not be a concept that they're even familiar with. Who knows? Depending on what it was that was here. But that's a really, really great answer. And so I'd like to close this episode by saying to everyone who's watching, pay it forward to someone today, whether it's putting your shopping trolley away, or buying the coffee for the person behind you, or just writing a little note, to someone, turning around saying, hey, you're awesome, whatever it is. I know when I've had that happen, it just totally made my day. And then I noticed that my interactions with other people after that, I wanted to give back. I wanted to make someone else's day. And so it can be infectious in a really positive way. So thank you for inspiring that and all of us. And if people would like to connect with you, Cran, where's the best place for them to do that?
LinkedIn is the best one for me. Okay. That's the one I'm working on. So Cran Middlecoat, that pilot guy. So cranmiddlecoat.com is just about there. The next couple of weeks, we should have that website really, really rolling. So there's a landing page there for the time being at cranmiddlecoat.com. We'll get those emails up and running as well. But the most reliable way at this point is through LinkedIn, because I'm on it multiple times a day. That'd be the best way to connect.
Awesome. So his name's up there on the page. We'll also comment, so you have his surname as well, and you can easily find him. If you have any trouble, just let me know on whatever platform you're watching this from, and I'll make sure that you guys get connected. Cran, thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you have a great time at your event after this, and we'll be back on the lounge next week. Stay tuned for our next episode. If this episode was enjoyable for you, please give it a like and subscribe on YouTube, and share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much.